Hello and welcome to day 4. Day 4 for me, not for you. It is December 11th, so we are a couple days behind, but day 4 of Advent of Code. I'm going to be going through day 4 problem here today. Let's jump right on in. Okay. Day 4, passport processing. Okay, so we've got detecting which passports have all required fields. Birth year, issue year, expiration year. Okay, so we've got a bunch of codes. Here's an example of what it will contain. That's the file input. Each passport is represented as a sequence of key value pairs separated by spaces or new lines. Passports are separated by blank lines. Okay, so there's going to be essentially 2 blank lines, right? So 2 new line characters, and one is just going to separate passports are going to have 2 new line characters. The first passport here is valid. All 8 fields are present. The second passport is invalid. It is missing HGT, the height field, etc. So, okay, it's interesting. The only missing field is CID. So it looks like data from the North Pole credentials, not a passport at all. And we can just ignore that. Okay, so it's not that CID is required. So basically everything else is required except for CID is what I'm getting here. Okay. Let's jump over. Okay. So let's open up this. We're going to say well, we've got part 1, right? So part 1, let's actually just copy this over from the previous day's code and then just remove some stuff. So we can remove that because we're going to be doing string processing, not a lot of math. We're going to just call this part 1, and we're going to have the data passed in. Part 1, data, we're going to be splitting on multiple lines, multiple new line characters. So essentially there is going to be in our input.txt file multiple new lines, and then we're going to have individual items within each passport that's going to be separated by either a space or a new line character. Okay, so let's also grab the input text from here. Actually, let's just start off with this sample text, and we'll test everything out on the sample text first. That's always best. Okay. So that's our data, but we know that within that data, we're going to have a record that can be split upon. So a record in data. So essentially we end up with, let's print this out here, because we can use the okay, what did I do wrong here? There's no attribute split, right, of course, because it needs a T. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have individual records within here, and we're going to have ECL, PID, EYR, HCL, and we need to validate that every single one of the passports have each of the 8 required fields, or they don't have a required field. Or they don't have the, what is that, the country ID? So they don't have the country ID. Okay, so let's take a look here. So we know what those required ones are going to be. So let's use that here. And we'll just take that. Right? Like this. Okay? So now we have a set that represents all of the required fields except for country ID, which is not a required field, right? Okay, because if it's missing, that means they're from the North Pole. Okay, So we need to go through each passport, right, which is going to be each record that we've split upon, and make sure that the passport has all of those required fields. So for, oh, actually, let's create a second. Yeah, let's create a second function that we're going to call def is valid here. We're going to say data. We're actually going to say passport here. We're going to validate the passport itself. Okay, and we're going to take the required list here, and for okay, so what just occurred to me is that I could just go through and make sure that this is in each of those strings, but I might get that wrong if, for example, you have ECL, right, whatever ECL is, eye color. If you have ECL that is HCL or EYR or whatever. So that might end up being, you might end up with characters in there that are invalid. So we actually need to double check in a different way that that passport contains each of those pieces. So for, although each of these have a colon after them, right? Perfect. So for rec in required, we're going to say that for X in passport, if, oh wait, hang on. Yeah, we're going to need to we're going to say x dot split on the semicolon, on the colon, and we'll take the first one for X in passport. If rec not in terms, return false. So by default, it's going to return true here because we're basically going to take the required here and we're going to break out all the individual terms, and we're going to say if it's not in the terms, then we're going to return false. Relatively straightforward there. Okay, so we take rec required, if rec not in terms, we're going to return false. So we can say for count is going to be 0 for passport in data if passport is valid passport, return count plus equals 1. Return count. And we'll condense this down just a little bit because there's a faster way to do this, but we will start off like this. Okay, so let's print out what the result of this is. So there are 2 that are valid there. Let's double check the answer here. The first passport is valid. Count the number of valid passports. Your improved system would report 2 valid passports. Okay, perfect. So we're getting the same results, which is promising. So let's copy in the data into our input here. And let's check the response here. Why are we printing all that out? Okay, 192, and let's get rid of all the, let's not print the data for the future. Okay, 192. Woohoo! That's the right answer. Perfect. Okay, so let's go on to part 2. Okay. Overlaying security. Passports with invalid data are getting through. Excellent. Birth year, issue year. Okay, so we end up with some validation metrics for the birth year, issue year, expiration year, height, hair color, eye color. Wow. Okay. Passport ID and country ID. Right. Which is just ignored, so we don't actually have to worry about country ID. Okay. So your job is to count the passports where all required fields are both present and valid according to the above rules. Okay, so now we've got to implement some rules. So let's take this one, and we're actually just going to say, oh, whoops. Oh, let's get past part 1 here. We're going to do this down below. This is going to be for part 2. Okay, and we're going to say term parameters, or just params. Okay, birth year. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to start by creating a bunch of lambda functions that essentially in one line I think we can get to this information. So essentially we pass in the information there. Birth year, issue year, expiration year, height. There's going to be something interesting there. 5976. Hair color. Oh, interesting. Okay. Exactly 6 characters. 0 through 9 or A through F. Eye color, passport ID is going to be a 9-digit number, including leading zeros. Okay. And exactly one of those options. Okay. Let's start off with the birth year. We'll just start off with birth year, which is going to be a lambda function. We're going to have x. We're going to say int x. And let's actually... Okay, so it's at least 1920. So we're actually going to say is less than or equal to the int of x is less than or equal to 2002. Okay, and we can copy this for that. There we go, because this is going to be something similar. Issue year is going to be 2010, and that's going to be at most 2020, okay, which makes sense because we're in 2020. Expiration year, 4 digits, at least 2020, and at most 2030. Okay, let's, oh. There we go. At least 2020. And at most 2030. There we go. Of course, it doesn't like my syntax. Height. Okay, so we're going to be given centimeters, a number followed by either centimeters or inches, right? So we have here height 170 centimeters. 170 centimeters. So the last 2 characters are going to be centimeters, and then we need to have the first. So the other ones. Interesting. Okay, so we will okay, so the last 2 characters, lambda x, we will say that we'll have essentially 2 options, or 2 options, and we're going to make each of these, I don't like seeing the errors. Bothers me. There we go. Okay. So we're going to say that either this is true or this is true. So we're going to say we've got x, which is going to be a string. We know the last 2 characters are going to be either CM or IN. So let's start there. Okay. X -2 to the end equals, let's do, what was the first example they gave? cm. And we've got another value. Okay, so and it needs to be at least 150 and at most 193. So let's steal this here. Okay, and of course this is going to be x from the beginning all the way up to the negative second character, I guess. Okay, and this is going to be between 150 and at most 193. Okay, and then we've got this one here, which is going to be inches. So let's actually just copy this part there because we're going to have a similar format. This is going to be inches. This is going to be 59. And this is going to be 76. Perfect. Okay, theoretically, did that correctly. Okay, hair color, a hashtag followed by exactly 6 characters, 0 through 9 or A through F, which, if I'm not misunderstanding, that's going to be hexadecimal, right? Which should be, we should be able to convert that to from base 16. So we could, in fact, say lambda x, and we'll say that so it's a hashtag followed, or pound sign, followed by exactly 6 characters. Okay, so we're going to say x0 is the pound sign, and int x1 to the end 16, yeah, 16. Let's just say that's greater than or equal to 0. Okay. ECL, I color exactly one of these. So we'll say lambda x in those. Okay. And then we have a passport ID, which is a 9-digit number including leading zeros. So lambda x, length x is 9, and int x is greater than or equal to 0, right? Because we're not going to have any negative numbers in there, theoretically. Okay. I think we actually might have just done that correctly. All right, let's find out. Part 2. Okay, so one interesting thing here is that we can, first off, validate that all of these are in there, right? We need to make sure that we'll just do 2 steps, essentially. So first off, if anything is missing, we know that it's invalid. So part 2 is going to be data. We're going to say part 1 def part 2 valid, and here's the passport. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Count is 0 for passport in data if part 2 valid count plus equals 1 turn count. Okay, relatively straightforward. Part 2 valid. Okay, so this is where we need to say, first off, if not is valid passport, right, which means that something is missing, we can just return false. which should help. We already know that there's going to be some records there, so we don't need to double check all of these term parameters, right? And we also can guarantee that we won't get any key errors as well as we check these, as we check all these. Okay, so next step is we're going to take the terms. So for similar to what we did up here, except that now we need a key and a value pair for those. So we're going to say terms is going to equal, actually we should just be able to say x dot split for x in passport, because this will return a list. Okay, for term in terms, we need to double check that if not term params term 0 term 1. Did I do this right? Did I do this right? I think I did. If oh wait, we're testing validity. So if it's not this, so that means it's invalid, return false. And if it passes everything, then return true. Okay, there we go. Interesting. Okay. Theoretically, this is correct. Let's see here. Part 2 valid. First it tests if it has all the fields, and then it will test whether or not these things. I'm probably going to get some kind of error here. Let's find out. Okay, BYR, not term params, key error BYR. Okay, let's go back to here. Oh. And let's input all of those. Those are our valid ones. These are our invalid ones. Okay, so we got 8 the first round, and here's what this looks like. Okay, so we did not, oh of course, because we didn't split using the colon. There we go, PID that. Okay, perfect. Key error CID. Oh, okay. Okay. For term in terms, if term equals CID, continue. Because that's the one that we can safely ignore. Okay, perfect. Key error CID. Okay, you know what? There we go. Let's just make it return true. Okay, 4. So we got 4 back saying that it's correct. Okay. Okay, let's see here. So this, okay, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there should be 4 valids. Okay, so let's go back here. There's our full input. Let's test this. Oh, we just printed off a lot, didn't we? Okay, 101. Let's see what the answer is here, and then we'll go back. If we get it correct, yay, we got it correct. Now let's go back and let's optimize this code slightly. Let's clean some of this up. Let's not print the terms. Okay. So this is returning true, which means that ultimately we can just sum part 2 valid, right? We can actually just say sum of that. So we should be able to say sum map, yeah, some map part 2 valid, and we're mapping data. Theoretically, that'll work. And then we can just get rid of this entire function. Let's test that out real quick. Ah, there we go. Okay, so that actually does work. Cool. So let's do the same thing here where we can get rid of part 1, right? We can just sum map is valid with the same thing. We'll actually just copy that, paste that in there. Is valid 192, 101. Perfect. Okay. Which means we can get rid of this code right there as well. Well, there you go. All right. Well, I don't think I'm gonna clean this up anymore. It's actually relatively straightforward at this point, I think. So, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was interesting at least. If you do have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Questions, comments, accusations, anything like that. If you like the video, like, subscribe, help me get to 1,000 subscribers or whatever, and we will keep going with this. So thank you very much, and see you in the next video.